right. Back to the block notes.
Yes, yes.
All right. Any little special follow-ups that we have?
Yeah, it was kind of one of those, like, after something happened, she's like, oh, I should have asked that.
Yeah.
So what does decentralized finance mean for our financial future, like, as a whole?
Well, one example I came across I thought was really cool is if you're familiar with the, what's it called, the broken window phenomenon or whatever, which is like you have your neighborhood, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a nice neighborhood, everything's going good, and then somebody moves out for whatever reason, mm-hmm. right? But they can't find a buyer really quick. Mm-hmm. And so the house is sitting there empty for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. Mm-hmm. And there's always kids or somebody in the neighborhood and they're playing around and boom, they break the window.
Yeah.
Well, nobody's there. So nobody's there to fix it.
Right.
And so now how's that neighborhood look? Mm-hmm. Right? The perception goes down and somebody else comes down the street and is like, oh, this is sort of a nice neighborhood, but that house is junk. I'll take out another window. Mm-hmm. Right? And now everybody's starting to look, and you've been teetering. This is like 2 houses down from you. You've already been teetering about moving to a better spot, and you're like, man, this place is going down. So you move out and don't find an instant buyer because people who come, they're seeing this one house.
Yeah.
Now your house is empty, and now you get a broken slippery slope on down.
Yeah.
This happens mostly because who takes responsibility of a home when people move out? Usually it's like a bank, right? Or if there's no bank, it's nobody. It's the person who moved. But the neighborhood has no control over that property and what to do.
Right.
Right? And so that's a phenomenon we've seen all over, especially like in the U.S.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Western nations have seen this. So what's an alternative? So start thinking about what we talked about with DeFi, right? Imagine you had this house and you have a block club or some kind of HOA or something, and you guys raise some funds where you guys become the bank, because that's the whole point of all of this, right? Be your own bank.
Yeah.
So now the neighborhood buys the house, right?
Oh.
And now the neighborhood could theoretically have an agent sell it off and issue a mortgage using something like a lending platform, right? And take out the mortgage. You could take out the mortgage, and then the person who buys the house could just pay back through an AVE or something similar to that. Or maybe it's not the broken window thing. Maybe it's just you fall behind on your mortgage payments. The bank's going to come and just evict you, and they don't really care about what happens to the house.
Right.
So maybe again, the neighborhood can be like, you know what do they owe? You buy the house out as a neighborhood from the bank, and then you can either allow that neighbor to stay there and pay back you, or you could still go through with an eviction process, and like before, you could rent that out. But now the neighborhood has this vested interest into this house,
right.
And that broken window problem starts to go away, because this is why people like neighborhoods where there's more homeowners and renters. Renters tend to only stay in a place for 3 to 5 years, and they don't really care as much about the property,
right.
And so don't treat the property as much. Oh, that's the landlord should get this. The roof's going by, the landlord should do this. The grass is going on, the landlord should do this.
Yeah.
And so you get this eyesore of a property, typically.
Yeah. Because incentives are not aligned.
Right. Incentives aren't aligned, and that's the genius of the game theory behind all these models, is it's about aligning incentives.
Yeah, that's like one of the biggest pieces I've learned throughout this journey so far, is that it's all about aligning incentives, which is really cool because, like, we all operate out of some sort of incentive, whether you want to say you do or you don't.
Absolutely.
Something is incentivizing you, and until people can all come together with their aligned incentives, things are going to be crazy.
Yeah, that's it. So that's really a good example to me of what the future of this, besides some of the evident, don't need centralization, arguments, which I'm not even really pro that. I think centralization works and is better in a lot, probably most situations, because it's more efficient. It's faster. You can get some things done. Everything shouldn't be. It's like why pure democracies, you don't see those spread around the world. That's decentralization. Every citizen gets a vote on every issue. You know how slow and non-progressive that would be?
Yeah.
You need some sorts of centralized pieces to get things moving.
Yeah.
But as technology and things advance, where we can get rid of the inefficiencies, like in banking, banking's a very complex thing right now. Money is issued by money in the U.S. New money is approved by the Treasury, but issued by the Federal Reserve Bank, but then distributed to retail banks who then distribute and lend out money and do all this stuff to people. And this is why, like, the whole lockdown when they were paying out checks, the paying out checks was so sloppy because the government who issued the money, the government who approved the money, couldn't issue the money.
Oh.
The Fed had to issue money, but then the Fed who issued the money, who created the money, couldn't distribute the money directly to people. They had to distribute to the banks.
Right, and
then the banks got to figure out how they were going to distribute, but then they have their own schemes of bureaucracy. So it has to go through like 10, 15 hands before it ever hit you.
Yeah.
It's inefficient. You can do it better.
Yeah, I would say so.
Right. So yeah, these are the power of that. And then you sort of mentioned what it meant for the future too in your definition, which was what did you say?
I don't know. I'm thinking like, well, I don't know. I don't remember. I think part of what I said that meant for the future would be the progression piece.
The progression piece.
Yeah, would be. I think that it really lowers the barrier to entry for people who want to provide progression in the sense like it'd be much easier to get a loan. Like you wouldn't have to jump through hoops and stuff. Like if you have the money, you have the money. Like you don't have
think
to
of micro lending.
Yeah, you don't have to like prove that you have good credit or any of these like weird documents that they ask for or you either.
But now here's a downside.
Okay, here let's go.
Right? True. You don't need to give up all your identity and all that stuff. But the lending right now doesn't work. Like an efficiency of a centralized system is you can do credit. You can go to a bank and ask for money. They're not going to ask you. You can get a loan and they'll ask you for zero collateral.
I see.
Because they're going to go off your credit. So until you have a credit system you can trustlessly trust, right, in DeFi, you can't do this whole lending thing if you don't have collateral. So that's great for like me. I'm in America, right? I'm not poor.
Right.
And I can put up a little bit of collateral to take out a loan.
Yeah.
If I'm in the global south and where, you're making 15 cents a week or something.
Yeah.
What collateral do you have to put up? You definitely don't got ETH or Bitcoin that you're going to put up. You know what I mean? To get the loan, to do the micro lending, it becomes a much more barrier of entry. You have to find these other systems. It's more efficient now in a centralized way.
Could it change the way people structure their financial plans though? Like, because when people have savings, but they like hide it under their mattresses, right? And then you could use your savings. Are you saying for the people who don't even have the privilege of having savings?
Exactly.
Like they
if
make
you got
the money,
savings,
they gotta spend it.
you're probably in the global 1%.
Oh, okay.
Because most people don't have savings.
Okay.
We're in America, which likes to call itself the richest country in the world, and that may be true.
Yeah.
Most people here don't have enough money in savings for what they say a $500 incident.
Yeah.
Oh no, my car broke down.
Yeah.
Well, they're in the red.
Yeah. How could you do some sort of a credit system using the blockchain or cryptos? I know that's like $1 million question.
Yeah, it's like if I had it, I wouldn't give it on this episode.
Yeah.
That would be the paid episode.
Yeah. That'd be like a seminar.
If you once we figure out decentralized IDs.
Yeah.
Because the power of those is you don't have to tie you're being more liberal with what an ID is in that sense, where you can trust validate it, but it doesn't have to. You don't have to dox yourself.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to have your photo on it. Like how nowadays, if for an ID to like be valid, it has to like literally have your face on it.
Well, right now, yeah, ID means what does the government deem you as?
Yeah.
But you're not what the government deems you as. You know what I mean? You're a much broader spectrum. So decentralized IDs will allow you to take that, and then you can take one of your decentralized IDs, whether that's what the government says you are or a separate entity. You can build up this trust layer into that identity, and then you can borrow against that trust in your identity. If you become a public figure, and there's value in association.
See, I hear you, and I think that it sounds good, but then also I feel like in the wrong hands, that could also just be like a social credit score, right?
Well, this is why, yes, absolutely. And this is why it's very important to build these things on decentralized, decentralized is the wrong word, on permissionless, censorship-resistant, open source networks.
Right.
Permissionless, trustless, censorship-resistant. If there's not that, now, if you have that, the offset of that is things tend to be decentralized. That's the only way we know how to do those kind of systems.
Bitcoin is that. So
Bitcoin is the most that I think we have, especially in a technological
to build
level.
Something like that as a second layer on Bitcoin would probably be the most ideal. Yes?
Potentially. But maybe it's not a second layer. There's these things called side chains, the concept of side chains, right? If you're familiar with Ethereum and you're familiar with Polygon, that's not a layer 2. They're just shifting over into layer 2 where they're built on top. Currently, they're a side chain, right? They're their own blockchain that syncs to the Ethereum blockchain. But it's not a true layer 2, right? They have to have their own security measurements inside of Polygon. So in DeFi's early days, Ethereum, all the DeFi projects that were getting built on Ethereum, Ethereum was the side chain to Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the sound money.
Oh, wow.
Stable coins weren't taken off yet. If you wanted to do DeFi, and still today even, it's probably the second or third. Top 3 things used in DeFi today as a backing asset. For number 1, I think undoubtedly is stable coins. We could look it up. Stable coins, then probably wrapped ETH, and then Bitcoin.
And that's
that's
soundness.
the new. Well, if you're going to do any kind of finance, you have to have sound money.
Right.
And before stable coins became a thing, which I question as sound money because it's just the dollar. If you don't think a dollar is sound money, then a stable coin ain't sound money.
Yeah, well,
but it's what people want. But there's demand for it, right? So in the early days of DeFi, Bitcoin was the backing asset, and that's why wrapped Bitcoin became a thing. So you have Bitcoin, but you had to use this trusted third party you would send them the Bitcoin, they would keep it locked up, and then they would mint an identical version of Bitcoin onto the Ethereum blockchain.
And that would be
and then that wrapped Bitcoin, that process made Ethereum Bitcoin sidechain.
Okay.
Because you can't do finance on Bitcoin.
Right.
But you could do it in Ethereum.
Right.
Now, it's not a side chain if you're using ETH because ETH is Ethereum's native asset. So if you're using ETH as a backing asset, well, now you're using ETH as sound money. But if you don't believe ETH, the token, is as solid as money as a Bitcoin or a stable coin, then it's acting more as a side chain. If you believe ETH is that hard asset, then you're using a natural asset. That would be similar to building layer 2s on top of Bitcoin. So it's all a sort of in viewpoints that can get sort of political in the crypto sphere on what is what. But in essence, so everything doesn't have to be layer 2. You could build it on Bitcoin, or you could just, somebody like me who I like other assets, right?
Yeah, me too.
I see value across the spectrum. I don't view them the same way I view Bitcoin.
Right.
When it comes to, if I got to put money if I'm trying to build wealth for my grandkids, I don't have grandkids, I'm not that old, but when I have grandkids, if I have grandkids, if I'm trying to build wealth for them,
generational,
I'm only putting it in Bitcoin. That's the only one I have absolute blind faith in will still be here 20, 50, 100 years from now. I think there is a strong argument for several other assets. And so if I wanted to do DeFi, if I wanted to do finance, right, I'll play around there.
With other
assets, but I might take a little, I might take some, it's just like when you have a savings account, you move it over to checking. So my savings is in Bitcoin. I might take a little Bitcoin and convert that to something else to do finance with. For me, I'm still in that old school mindset. I do that to usually earn more Bitcoin to put into that savings stash.
So here's something that I always kind of struggle with is like, okay, so you have a savings or like somebody has a savings and it's in Bitcoin. Now, is there something that they could do DeFi related that's like super low risk, but to still get some sort of like a return? Like, because you were saying that being the liquidity provider is a pretty
risky thing,
good size of risk. Is there like, because if you put it into a bank you get like 0.001%, so like, that's better than nothing, right? But if you are holding on to Bitcoin just in a wallet and it's just sitting there and it's not doing anything, I mean, it's appreciating if the price of Bitcoin goes up, so there's that, but to just like double down on,
there's a lot of games you can play with it, but you have to trust. This is what the whole BlockFi, Voyager, all these collapses that happened. People weren't happy enough with just storing wealth. They wanted to earn yield. And so they gave control of the Bitcoin up to these companies, said, give it to us, who were then going to go play these finance games with your Bitcoin. Give it to us and we'll give you 4% yield, 2% yield, 3% yield, 5%, whatever they were offering.
right?
So, and people who did that lost their Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So there's a risk to finance if you have DeFi, but that's just traditional finance using crypto. It's not DeFi, it's traditional finance just using crypto.
Right.
If we can get to a level where we can do real DeFi and switch this open finance system we have now to decentralized finance for real, then sure, there's a way to do it. But right now, nobody's figured out a way to do it that can be trustless. You can do it in a way that's permissionless. You can do it in a way that's transparent and open. I don't think too many people have figured out a way to do it where it's entirely trustless. At least as trustless as whatever base chain, which is the organization you have to deal with, right? If I deal with Chase Bank, I'm trusting JP Morgan, right? If I'm dealing with Bitcoin, I'm trusting that the math in the Bitcoin blockchain. If I'm trusting Ethereum, I'm trusting in the math of the Ethereum blockchain. If I'm trusting in a Cosmos chain, I'm trusting in the basis of those. You got to trust in that core base layer chain. If you can't trust that, you can't trust anything built on top of it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lesser trust assumption as you move up the stack.
If it's a poor foundation, then.
Yeah. So a lot of people are building on very poor foundations. Nobody has. So like, if you ask me about like decentralization, I would say ETH is. You got Bitcoin, which is the textbook definition of the most decentralized thing we have. Then Ethereum. Everything else is sort of questionable, right? I have a third. I won't rank it. I won't keep going down the list. But you have Bitcoin, which is like far. It is currently the definition of
like the
most decentralization thing you can have. Now, if you put the middle bar, Ethereum is well over there. Not as far as Bitcoin, but to me, that's over there.
Yeah.
And some things are even worse than centralized products.
Yeah.
Right? So, you have to, it's your own personal scale. Where is it? If that's decentralized, whatever's built on top, the DeFi on top is going to be less decentralized, but is it better than the alternatives?
Right.
I think almost every open finance project that's got like a blue chip one. Some of them that we mentioned, like the Uniswaps and the Aves and things like that. I think those are way better solutions than banks and stocks and bonds.
Yeah.
I trust those way more than I trust the others.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong because I take that risk. So do your own research. But I trust them much more. I trust that I don't have to trust them much more than everything else.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I hope one day we can get that level that I feel Bitcoin provides. I hope we get that across the board on several different things so we can do real DeFi.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
I just don't ever want to see it on Bitcoin directly.
Yeah. So interesting. Because if to me it seems like I've heard it being said, like it's a take your power back kind of thing. But then now that you're saying with the global thing, I'm like really struggling because like the people who, like you were saying, you know, work for 15 cents and they have to immediately spend the 15 cents to get food for their family. Like, I'm wondering if there's, I don't know, some way to.
Well, this is why I don't think we're at yet, you know.
Yeah.
Which is the people who built all of it were people who had the privilege to be able to build all of it.
Right.
But that was a tool. It was a gift to the world, right? That was that altruism aspect. Now a lot of the people who are really innovating, let's say in the Bitcoin block space, this is that global South part. These poorer countries, these emerging economies, who don't have these incumbents in there trying to hold it back. They're really doing a lot of experimentation and innovation and stuff, while the Western world is playing with DeFi mostly to make more money.
Right.
I'm not one of those. I'm like, just be honest about what you're building or doing, and then we can be friends.
Yeah.
Just don't lie about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because do it to make money, because you have the privilege to be able to be focused on that.
Right.
These global South countries don't even have sound money. They don't have any kind of financial system.
Right.
They're not unbanked. Like, banks just don't exist.
Yeah.
Right? It's totally.
Yeah.
But now, as you build out these DeFi platforms, for whatever reason you're building them for, we can take that, and as they get perfected, we can repurpose them to, again, be more altruistic and give to these emerging economies, or economies that aren't emerging yet that should be emerging, and let them innovate off of these tools and keep rebuilding and refinancing. And those that they build, that's going to be what really sets people free.
Yeah.
You know, being a decentralized Charles Schwab, that doesn't excite me.
Yeah, no.
So.
Yeah.
All right, we can get into more, though. Write down all your questions and think about it. And thanks for checking out the show. Don't forget to check out theblockument.com and on all the socials at the Blockument. And if you got questions and insight, reach out and let us know.
Yes, talk to us.
Talk to us. Come for the riches.
Stay for the revolution.
There we go.